This is Maggie Sailing with Startup NV, and today, part of the Launch Rural Nevada Education Series, we're going to be talking about market sizing, and that includes TAM, SAM, and SOM.
Two things you really need to do for you before you get on this roller coaster ride that is a startup. And that is to talk to your customers to make sure that you're talking to people that you don't know, that have no interest in making you that happy, to see that you are making something that people will want to buy and at what price point they will want to buy it. So we call that customer validation. And then the second thing you should do is understand how big your market is. By understanding how big your market is and how much of an impact you think that you can make, you can understand whether you're on a juggernaut or if you have a nice, stable family income. And there's a huge difference between them. Investors are not likely to want to help you with the latter if it's just a family-based business, but the Small Business Administration might be willing to help you with that. But an investor who is looking for a 10 to 30x return is not going to be interested in a family business, a Main Street type business. So you should be very realistic with yourself when it comes to the market size. So they've been reduced to these things called TAM, SAM, and SOM. So what is that? TAM is the total addressable market, and this is all the people in all the world who could possibly buy your product or service. Okay, it's a really good starting point, and this type of number is researchable. And in fact, when it comes to research, the two top numbers, TAM and SAM, need to be researched. They cannot be derived. So you need to engage with some sort of research ability to get to what the market currently is. So TAM, we can say that's the whole world. And SAM, which is the serviceable available market, would be probably taking it down to the United States. Now, if you're doing a purely internet business, you might pick a couple of different countries where you have the ability to market your product or service. But along with understanding how big the market is, you need to also understand how are you going to get your customers. So you want to pick an area for your service available market where you can afford to actually make inroads into that market. The places where you can find research on what the total addressable market is, you should also be able to chunk that down into the serviceable available market, which would be either the United States, or if you are doing a mom and pop business, then it would be Las Vegas, let's say, that you're going to open a certain kind of restaurant in Las Vegas. So you should be able to, with the research, figure out what the TAM and the SAM are. Now for SOM, this is your serviceable obtainable market. And there's a couple of rules about this, my rules. They need to be time bound. So what you're trying to derive is how much you think you can realistically make in, say, 3 to 5 years in your portion of SAM. So you can see on the left side, we have this circle within circles. This is called a stacked Venn diagram. And it is the easiest way to understand these numbers because they are all smaller percentages of the one above them. Now, just how important is understanding your market size? So in this slide, we have a picture of several sort of well-known venture capitalists. And in looking at slide decks from companies, they all want to see the market opportunity or the market size, and they want to see it pretty early on. So this is generally which slides are required by each of these different groups or individuals. And most of them want to start with the problem and then the solution, and then understanding how big a problem this is. What is the opportunity? So it's really, like I said, it's something that should be included. We'll ding you on it if you haven't done it properly. And it needs to be done in dollars, not people. Understanding the number of people that are in your particular target market is helpful, but it should be depicted in terms of what they spend on your product or service. TAM gives context for the whole upside for where Uber is now. Uber is worldwide. We're going to talk about Uber in a minute. So it gives you the understanding of how big it could possibly be. SAM, the service available market, de-risks for investors. It helps them to understand the first markets that you're going after and what that potential is. And it de-risks it because it helps them understand timelines, like how long will it take you to get there? And SAM is generally 1 to 10% of the total addressable market. Now, SOM, again, I said it should be a realistic projection, and it's kind of a rabbit hole. You can look at a bunch of different ways to try to figure out what your SOM is, and you can get very caught up in it. But the point is you have to be realistic with yourself, and you have to be able to explain it to a potential investor. This is how we see it going. We think we're going to be able to get these specific people to buy in this market, and after Las Vegas, we're going to go to San Francisco. You just need to have a logical layout for how you're getting to your SOM within your 3 to 5 years. All right, so how do you calculate TAM, SAM, and SOM? And there are expensive ways to do it, and there are less expensive ways to do it. So the research on the TAM numbers is out there, and you can find it with CIA World Factbook, the World Bank, these different resources I've listed here, the UN, OECD, and they will have large markets. So for example, transportation. That should not be that difficult. Google's a great research. I was just updating some of the data that I have in this deck here to bring the revenue for Uber and Airbnb up to date. So this information is available. There are databases that, and here's the good news, there are databases that are subscribed to by both UNLV and UNR. And because they are land-grant universities, they have a duty to help the public, the tax-paying public that funds them. So I have at the end of this deck some names of people who can help you with their databases. They have some that are the same in both UNR and UNLV, but they have some that are different. So it behooves you to contact both of them to help you with this research. And the more specific you are with your questions, the better their data is going to be. Another way to calculate TAM, SAM, and SOM is where you start with your first market. You start very local and then you get bigger. This requires a lot of assumptions, and it's usually you end up underestimating how big the market is, but it's a very sort of realistic, pessimistic way to go about doing it. Big corporations can contract with Gartner and Forrester and these other research organizations where you're going to spend $20,000 or $30,000 to get the research done for you. And it's mostly big companies, not startups, that are doing this. A big company that wants to enter a different market would contract for this sort of research. There are some, I list some here, App Annie and Business of Apps, that are available for a fee. I believe UNLV has App Annie as a subscription, but it may not anymore. They change from year to year too. So if you're developing an application, a phone app, they have tremendous data on that. BizMiner and Statista are a couple of other research databases where if you do a search in Google, it will give you kind of the high level stuff, but it won't give you any of the detailed stuff. But that's a good place to start, because then if you know that they have high level information on your topic of interest, then going to UNLV, UNR, and asking for Statista, you want more refined data, they should be able to help you with that. And I know that Patrick over at UNLV is great at doing this, and Ken especially, they do have statistics. Okay, so here is an example for Uber, and this was the TAM, SAM, and SOM that they presented back in 2007 when they were first presenting to investors. So they picked their TAM as all of the transportation industry. And that's, I mean, it's valid, they fall within transportation, but they're not doing ocean freight and they're not doing air transportation. They were a taxi and limo service in San Francisco. So they were trying to expand. And so they were looking at the larger markets available. And they really kind of targeted the top 5 US cities to start with. So from their transportation worldwide as their TAM, they then looked at within the United States, what was taxi and limo service. Okay, and that gave them 4.2 billion. And then they did something kind of interesting, is they actually gave a best case, a worst case, and a realistic case. So in the Venn diagram, they show the best case, which is they become a market leader in this alternative to taxis, and they would get to $1 billion in revenue in 5 years. Realistically, they thought they could get a percentage of the top 5 US cities. And their worst case was, we're just going to stay a 10-car service in San Francisco where we're serving 100 clients. That's back in 2007. So their revenue in 2020, which is one of the pieces of information I just looked up, is 11.14 billion. And their current valuation is 73.7 billion. But they have gone into broader transportation services. They do have Uber Freight. They have Uber Eats, which you know is food delivery, UberX, and Uber Mobility. So they have expanded what their SAM was originally. The next example we have is Airbnb. Okay, so Airbnb actually started with air mattresses. The idea was, if I have an air mattress and a spare room, and there's a big convention coming to San Francisco, I can rent this air mattress for a certain amount of money. And they started doing that. So when they went to, this was 2008, I believe, one of their, I may have combined 2 of their slides from their deck for the market size. So they looked at the number of trips booked worldwide, 1.9 billion. And they knew that people who were going to sleep on mattresses were not going to the 4 seasons. So they went for budget and online trips as their available market. And then they figured that they could get to 10.6 million. I don't know exactly how they got to that. You can see it's not an arbitrary 10%. It's not an arbitrary 5%. It's a more realistic, smaller percentage than that. So far at this point, for their market research, they were dealing with trips, numbers of trips, and not really dealing with dollar figures. So in the next part of their slide, they take the 10.6 million trips they think they can anticipate, times the fee that they figured they would make. They'd been doing this a little bit. So they knew that the average fee was $20 for 3-night stays. And they figured that within 3 years, they could get to $200 million in revenue. So Airbnb went public last December, and their current valuation is 130 billion, and their income from last year, 2020, now this is 10 years later, was 3.38 billion, which is a hell of a lot more than 200 million. So again, right time for that industry. Okay, so it's a little bit harder to depict a double-sided marketplace. It's harder to create a double-sided marketplace because in essence, you have 2 sets of customers, 2 sets of buyers. So how do you depict this in TAM, SAM, SOM? This slide shows Boom Startup, which is another accelerator in Utah. They created this as a sample. I would actually like them to go 1 level deeper, but they haven't done that. So my understanding is that this was for a 2-sided marketplace where people who like to buy customized clothing online could go, and people who create customized clothing could sell it there. So it was a 2-sided marketplace. And so they looked at the different aspects that make up this marketplace, custom clothing design, and they started with the global clothing market. And then they went down to the custom clothing market, and then they went down to US custom clothing market. Yeah, but they haven't gotten to the local area where they're going to be. So I think they could have gone 1 level lower. And this follows suit for the other, custom clothing manufacturing. What is it globally? What is it customized globally? And then what is it customized in the US. And the same thing for internet sales. I'm sure that they tried to go to a number that was somewhere between, you can't really add up 32 billion and 27.4 billion and 24 billion, because then you're almost starting over with a TAM, SAM, and SOM with those numbers of figures. But you should be able to come to with whatever parameters you set that you can explain that make sense to you and that you think will make sense to an investor, come to a figure that combines something from each one of these. So again, the Venn diagram where they're gonna like fall together because these things are going to cross connect. Okay, so here we have another example. So let me tell you a story about this. Was an actual startup. They were in New York, and there were a couple of guys that got this idea that they should be able to rent out jerseys of professional ball players. So they picked the 5 major team sports that are most popular in New York, which is where they were located. They looked at, for all of the United States, they started with that as their TAM, and there were 150 million Americans that watched the 5 major team sports. And through their sales channel, they were trying to figure out, okay, we're going to start in New York. How many New Yorkers do we have that are watching these 5 major sports? And then, like I said before, doing customer validation is a great, great service to yourself and to your business. They went to Yankee Stadium and they talked to people, and they figured that their target market were going to be season ticket holders. So they talked to lots of people, and they tried to find the ones that were season ticket holders to gauge their interest in renting a jersey for the whole season. And they would rent the jersey, send it out to them, provide them a way to send it back to them. They would clean it. They would have it available for the next year. If the player stayed there, they also were planning to make it so that if your player left the team, you could automatically trade in his jersey for your next most favorite player. So they had thought a lot about how they, as sports fans, would want to have this work. What surprised them in doing their customer validation was that they would talk to people who were not season ticket holders, and they said, hey, I only go to 2 games a year, but I'd love to wear a jersey for that, and I'll pay you more for it. So they discovered that they had this whole other channel of customers that they hadn't really thought about. And then they were also surprised that women were interested in doing this as well. That's what their customer validation showed them. So this is a rework of that last slide. So instead of having it in table format, we took the information that they had in the last slide and made it a stacked Venn diagram. So you can see it goes from 150 million people to 11 million New Yorkers to 1.3 million who they expected would have some interest. But this doesn't, and that was based on their 11.7% survey that they did in the stadium a couple of times. This doesn't include revenue, okay? So we want to understand TAM, SAM, and SOM in terms of revenue. So what they did was they took their SOM and they figured, based on the research they had done, that 60% were going to rent it one time and 40% were going to rent a jersey for the season. They multiplied that times their fees. So the one-time fee was $50, the season was $250. And they came up with their revenue projection. So turns out that they're going to make a lot more on the season rentals than they are on the one-time rentals, but they hadn't even considered that. So their total SOM for their New York market in 3 years was 169 million, completely explainable. And this is what you're going for. You're trying to make it as simple as possible to understand what you think you're going to do. And then this also sets goals for yourself. All right, so I have more examples. So these are slides from companies I've actually seen, their decks. This was an actual slide. Market information. The total available market in the professional sports industry stands about $73 billion. It doesn't tell you what is this dealing with. And the company expects to have 7.79 billion yearly revenue in 6 years. So they expect to garner 10% of the market in 6 years. Now, Of course, we're taking this slide out of context. You're not seeing the rest of the deck. As I recall, this was a company that wanted to make a brand new sport. And so not only were they trying to gain 10% of the market, they were trying to gain 10% of the current sports fans and switching them over to a new sport. I believe that they were going for some competitive samurai sport league. Here is another sports thing, and this company was trying to create online tutoring for sports. And so they thought that they would start with hockey players first because the founders were interested in hockey. And some of the other founders were also interested in gaming. And they felt that there would be people who would pay for an online tutoring session with somebody, a star in their field, whether it was a professional gamer or a player that was in one of the NHL teams. So they were looking at people instead of trying to understand how much money they could make. So they used 54 million youth athletes as one part of their SAM and 1.8 gamers interested in competitive play. Okay, but they never took it to the next level. They never said, okay, we think we've got these two different avenues. We think that the gamers have more disposable income, and so they're going to contribute 60% of what we project for our sales. And the youth athletes are going to project 40%. They didn't take it far enough. So, and they never dealt with how much money are professional players making in these things. And something that would be good for them to actually understand is, of the fans, of the hockey players, what are they spending on gear, supportive gear, like not their own equipment, but like how much are they spending on professional players and their paraphernalia, fan stuff. They didn't take it far enough to actually understand, an investor to understand what they were trying to do and who they were trying to target. All right, this next company had a phone case that was a cooling phone case. So they started with mobile phone accessories worldwide. That's a great start. No problem with that. The protection cover market, okay, that is a subset of the phone accessories market. I've got no problem with that. And then they stopped. They didn't they didn't do their actual homework to make projections on what they thought their sales could be. So, and they also have a spelling error in the last, in the SOM area, a few competitors. So always, please spell check your slide decks. All right, so now we have some good examples, and these are going to get progressively better. So there are snippets of good stuff in each one of these. This is the industry revenue for hair care services. This company wanted to do mobile hair care. They would come to you. And so they needed to understand what the existing hair market is like. So they put in 107 billion for worldwide, and then in the United States. And so in our graph, we're seeing the United States figures, 34 billion. And then they're starting in California, and I'm sure that they did some sort of research to find this. What this doesn't do is it doesn't take it to the next step. And there was not a second slide that showed, okay, in California, this is how much people are spending on hair care at salons, but how many of them are willing to have you come to them? So in this case, I know it's a great question. How are we going to figure out what percentage of people will pay for someone to come to them? And so we should try to find a parallel industry. It's not exactly parallel, but you can go get a car wash at a car wash, or you can have somebody come to you. And in California, the percentage of people that will pay for someone to come to them to do their cars is probably higher than many other states, just because California has more cars and they have people who care more about what their cars look like. So you could possibly say, okay, let me figure out how many people pay for car detailing to come to me. and use that same percentage to the people who would have hair care come to me, because not only do I want my car to look good, I want to look good. You know, it might be silly, but at least it is a way to think about something and something that you could justify. Now, this example, I love that he says his competition is anything and everything that you can sleep on. And that's true. He made a very high-end bed that would kind of envelop you, and I think it would move around a little bit too. The problem that I have with this slide is there's so much information on it that that stacked Venn diagram would really be helpful. He lists all these different competitors. The adjustable market is 2.5 billion, mattress market is 14.3 billion, bed and mattresses together is 39 billion. Okay, so he gets to 111 billion for bedding and furniture. Okay, so the way that this is listed, like US bedding and furniture is more like TAM. And then bed and mattress is SAM, mattresses are SOM. Okay, adjustable beds, that's a subset of the mattress market. So we've got like one market over here. And then for hospital beds and medical devices, these things are a different market. So it's going to be more business to business rather than business to consumer. So that market is 2 billion. And then reclining chairs, I don't know people who voluntarily sleep in chairs. Sometimes people have to do it just because they can't breathe otherwise. But I'm not sure that he would be, taking much share from that. But at least he was really thoughtful about all these different markets and what part he would fit into. Again, he didn't take it to where he was making a projection about how much he could make. His product is so high priced that there are going to be very few people that can actually afford it. Next example. This was a company that was doing telemedicine. I had a problem with this slide. I mean, I love the Venn diagram, but I think that he is actually telling me about users and not about the dollar figures. Because just before we started, I did, telemedicine global market, and it was like 132 billion. So I'm not sure that he was giving me dollar figures instead of people, but he did start with global, US, and then Vegas market. So this is really understandable, really simple. And if he's telling me about people and not dollars, I would say, do exactly this, but give me dollar sizes. To me, this is the best market slide ever. This company is one of the companies that we've invested in. This is Outlaw Soaps. And they know that their market, their products are outlaw, right? So they want you to live outlaw. It's a whole lifestyle type thing. They know that their markets include military members, REI customers, Harley Davidson riders, and annual festival attendees. So Danielle was very thoughtful about who the market was, and this is completely justifiable to an investor. 8% of Americans, so we've already taken it, we're not even in the world, we're at the US, and 8% of Americans are her potential customers, and the market potential is $3 billion. Okay, in addition to those, she broke it out to how she got to the 3 billion is explained here. She was looking at the personal care market, personal fragrance market, home fragrance, and added them all up and got to $3 billion. The point is, she can completely justify how she gets to the potential of $3 billion market. And then she already had traction. So her next slide showed where she was in terms of getting to this big number. I'm going to repeat what I said in the beginning. TAM is the big picture, the completely upside potential. SAM is your more local picture and your specific target market. And then SOM is a projection. This is the one number that can be derived about what you think you're going to achieve in 3 to 5 years. I also promised you some resources. These are 2 research librarians at UNR. We have Tara Rednecki. She does intellectual property, and she is the engineering librarian, so she can help you with this type of research. And Patrick Griffiths is the business librarian at UNLV. And I have referred many people to him. And as I said, for both of them, the more specific you can get with your questions, the better the data will be. If you ask a very broad-based question, they're not going to be able to give you really usable information. So let's say you're doing an app. Okay, that's a good place to start. It's an app and it's in the gaming field and it has to do with puzzles. Okay, that is a completely doable search. That's not hard at all. Thank you.